morning and welcome to our 13th or 14th podcast here.
Good morning, Larry. Good morning,
Good
good
morning.
afternoon, and good night.
Isn't it?
Yes.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Yes, it is.
As the great Truman Show said, I believe.
It truly is. So, guys, let's jump right into it because we have a number of questions from some different viewers. I guess we're getting some fair eyes. Hundreds of people are looking at the different podcasts at different times, and then of course they're writing in with some questions. So this week, let's take some of these questions. The first one is: explain the growing speculation that the U.S. dollar's dominance might end up being challenged and eventually defeated by cryptocurrencies, in particular Bitcoin. What's our position and thoughts on that, gents? Who wants?
Well, if I may, I'd like to start because at the tender age of 52 and have been around in this business for over 2 decades, I must say this topic comes up in various ways. If we go back to when the euro was launched 20 years ago, there was a speculation that the euro would replace the US dollar as the unofficial world currency or dominant currency, as you've said, Larry, and there was reason to believe that that may be the case, but again, it never happened. And then there was speculation that oil would be valued or bought and sold in euros. And again, that never happened. And then there was discussion, before we even get to the cryptocurrency side of things, then there was speculation that the Chinese currency would become the world unofficial currency. So, the US dollar, because it's at the top, is often this discussion is often raised. What's its next threat, or what's its next challenge? Well, now we're talking about cryptocurrencies, and is it going to topple the US dollar? I mean, it's an incredibly good question. I'm just, based on my experience, I'm not overly convinced at this stage, because we've had some pretenders to the crown and that have all fallen by the wayside. But we all know that nothing lasts forever, and nothing ever goes in a straight line. So I will just start with that answer, because this is not something new to the US dollar. Who's next?
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in after that. So supporting Glenn's views that there have been many challenges on the dollar over time, um, and whilst we're not really in the position to dethrone the dollar completely, we are in a position to see new entrants uh, to global currency, which may be better suited to an economy that has a global Starlink internet, or you're making internet payments online, and um, you have global companies. There could be a new global currency, which is a buy-in um, uh, from the tech community. There's also the challenge of the dollar dominance from the BRICS nations. So Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, being, as Glenn mentioned, we had the previous Euro countries coming together with their currency being the euro. There's now talk of a potential BRICS currency, which I mean, it's still early discussions. There is nothing concrete that we've seen. There's also talk of a return to a gold standard, where countries have been stockpiling gold. And then, in our world, a lot of people are talking about Bitcoin being a potential alternative currency, which doesn't have a counterparty between you and your wealth. So my view is that I think we may be a few steps away from the dollar being dethroned, but we are at the point of seeing new entrants to the market, being new entrants to what currency is oil traded in. We've seen recently that Russia is trading their oil in Chinese yuan now. Um, the prevalence of the dollar as a the go-to currency to swap FX, and as the base currency could be challenged by other currencies, but not to dethrone it completely, but just a bit of competition. You're on
Graham,
mute.
you're on mute.
You say it best when you say nothing at all.
That's a terrible
Graham,
insult.
you understand that mute in these videos and Zoom things is probably the biggest challenge out there.
Yeah,
I know you're an IT guy.
yeah. Predicting the Bitcoin price is much easier than remembering to put yourself off mute. Um, so, so my perspective is that, so I'm high conviction that the, let's call it the dollar hegemony or the dollar world order fails. You know, but I'm very low conviction on when that happens, because it's, if you look at how the system is put together, it's debt based. So for every dollar that's created, there's another dollar of debt that's created. That's just how the system works, and that debt pile then grows at interest, and over a 40-year period since we left the gold standard, it compounds at a specific rate. And that's one of the reasons that you have to have the interest rate so low, because as soon as you raise the interest rate, that debt burden just starts to grow that much more, uh, that much more greatly. So that's why at some point in time, it's like if the Fed continues to hike rates at the rate it is, something's going to break. And you see that the cracks starting to show, if that's SVB or Credit Suisse. Your weaker players start to show their frailties. So that's why, in my view, the Fed cannot continue on the current rate hiking cycle. It's going down. For me, the numbers just don't add up, and that will break the system. So that's why at some point in time they have to revert back to low interest rates and money printing. And then you're now fighting the other beast, which is inflation. So you get to choose. Do you want to fight the inflation beast, or do you want to fight the deflation beast? And is it death by drowning, or death by dehydration? Those are your two forces that you're playing with. And as you're going further and further down this road with the animal of compounding interest nipping at your heels, at some point in time that system breaks. But on the other hand, betting against the system has been a very, very poor investment strategy, because every couple of years there's a 2008 crisis, there's a COVID crisis, and everyone says it's all over, and they've been wrong every time. So you would have lost a lot of money. You've probably gone bankrupt if you're betting on the system failing. So that's why I'm very reluctant to say, hey, this time it's different. This time the final domino falls, and we're moving into a new financial system, because it's not a successful investment strategy, because you're generally going to get your timing right. So I think that's part of the challenge. But at the same time, I do feel that we're moving further and further down, inevitably, to a change in the global currency system. And I think that if you look at what the central banks are doing, they're starting to prepare an alternative system in the form of a central bank digital currency system. And there's no secret about that. I mean, that's out in the open. They're being very clear about their plans. So, why are they almost preparing a new currency, a new system, if they aren't anticipating the old one being set aside, either being forced to do that or electively? We remain to see how that plays out. So, that's my summary. High conviction on the system eventually failing, which is why I like the alternatives of gold, silver, and Bitcoin, but not high conviction on saying that this is it and this is the time to be running full tilt into those alternative assets. So that would be the lay of the land as far as I'm concerned. I mean, the other thing I'll point to, which is an explicit metric that you can look to, is the debt to GDP ratio. And currently in the US, as well as a number of other developed markets, it's over 100 to 1. So that means that your debt pile is significantly greater than your GDP, which is your capacity to actually service that debt. And that number only moves, or that ratio only really moves in one direction. So at some point in time, you have to have a tipping in the scale. When that happens, I don't know. And I'm not going to be the guy putting up my hand and saying when it's going to happen. All I can say is that it's inevitable that at some point in time, we're going to see that transition.
You know, I was listening to a lot of the different news channels, even on both of the, whether you're on the left or the right, and some in the middle and extremes to both sides. What I've been hearing is that greater than 50%, the dollar will no longer be the dominant currency. The fact that the U.S., through its control of the dollar, can control so much of what goes on in the world, these other countries who needed to use the dollar have gained in such strength and are forming alliances with each other where they don't need that as much. Then, of course, Graham, you mentioned the New World Order, and I forgot the guy's name who, Klaus Schwab, I think, has been putting some of this together. The whole idea there is, yes, to have one unified, but so to speak, controlled by maybe one organization, as opposed to everybody trying to trade in their own fiat, but you have a bunch of controls, everybody stepping on the gas and the brakes and turning left and turning right at all these different intersections with all these different fiat currencies. If it could be controlled by this one world order, that seems to be where it's going. Even the U.S., and they're working right now with the banks, the bigger banks right now, that eventually you won't even be able to use a dollar. You'll have to use a central bank digital currency, which really, to one effect, it's almost what we're doing now. I mean, very rarely does somebody run around with a bucket of cash, in their pockets paying for things. But this way they can completely follow it. They can even control it. And, they've talked about if they decide that, you're spending too much money gambling, or you're shopping too often, next time you go and you'll present your digital card, the teller might have to say, Glenn or Bilal or Graham, I'm sorry, but your account's been closed for purchasing new sneakers. You've already bought 3 this month. Sorry. And so that's, I see that where we're headed. I also, if you listen to what's going on, at least here in the U.S., it's almost like we're spending so much of our time eating ourselves alive with, I'll just call it just bullshit issues, while the rest of the world is getting their armies in order, getting their kids and their educations in order, right? And here we are worrying about, and I've got nothing against the gay, lesbian, he, him, his, and hers, but while we're focused on that, the world is moving at a very fast pace ahead of us. And so I think they're moving in geometric fashion. And so I can see where the Bitcoin issue is, hey, nobody can control it, but then the worry that it becomes number one super quick is the same issue, but nobody controls it. At least, countries can go fight each other. When I say fight, pick up the phone and yell and scream and argue about, hey, what are you doing when it comes to your fiat versus my fiat? At least there's somebody you can call who can make a change. Right now on Bitcoin, there's, unless they find whatever the guy's name is, Satoshi Kamochi, unless you can find him and he can do something about it, hey, it's, it's whatever happens. But anyway, I guess we'll see. The next question is, you see different countries that are declaring Bitcoin as, quote, their mainstay, like in El Salvador and or Brazil, etc. What do you think that's going to do in terms of moving Bitcoin even faster? And I also want you to look at that vis-a-vis what has been suggested for the next couple of years, that we are going to see a lot more bank failures. We are going to see more inflation, even growing bigger and harder. gas prices going up, and then also consider, when I say that right now the government's working with just a handful of banks, I understand Japan has about 5 banks, Canada has about 25 banks, yet the United States has close to 5,000 banks. And they're just saying it's crazy. So when you take all that into account, guys, what do we see for Bitcoin and cryptos in general in terms of growth over the next 2 to 3 years? I just don't see how they can't go up. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I can go first. So yeah, so we've seen some countries like El Salvador, Central African Republic adopting cryptocurrency as legal tender, and I think it didn't work too well for them to date. Um, and we've even seen in the US, we've seen I think the governor of New York and Miami have switched their salaries into partly or fully crypto related settlement. And I don't know if that has worked well for them either. Um, so I've got a bit of noise here. Graham, do you want to just talk? Let this pass here.
Okay, sure. Um, Look, I think in terms of Bitcoin as an adoption, as an alternative currency to other fiat currencies, you mentioned El Salvador. Um, my view is that it needs to come from the individual. I think that Bitcoin was not created for institutions. It wasn't created for governments. It was created for the individual, and it was created that individuals can transact peer to peer without third party interference. And I really think that's where this movement, let's call it that, needs to take place and take hold if it's going to be strong and it's going to be sustainable for the long term. So, El Salvador, I mean, it's a tiny country in respect of the world. I mean, maybe they've set some kind of precedent by making that move, but obviously that's going to hopefully be a very small brick in a much bigger picture of what Bitcoin could be as an alternative to a fiat monetary system. You mentioned CBDCs and some of the restrictions around it. I mean, that is definitely a concern for myself personally, someone that values liberty and freedom, to be able to do with my funds, with my wealth, with my money as I see fit, and not to be dictated to by an overarching authority. I think that's um, an overreach of the states or of the bank to have that level of control. So I'm very much against that. Um, and look, I also say that many people expect in this next period for the dollar to lose ground against other currencies, and I don't expect that at all. So Brent Johnson talks extensively about his theory. He calls it the dollar milkshake theory, where he talks about a world that where the economy ultimately fails, but it fails with the dollar going up, and that's because the dollar still is really still seen as the ultimate safe haven in our current monetary system. And most of the third world debt is denominated in dollars. So they still have to pay their dollar loans. So what do you have to do to pay the interest on a dollar loan? You have to obviously inflate your currency. So that whether that's rands being now printed to convert into dollars, or Mexican pesos, or um, Turkish lira, as we're seeing at the moment, you have a hyperinflation and devaluation of the local currency to pay your dollar debt. And that's why ultimately I think that the dollar still goes up in a, let's call it a currency reset period. So, and the ultimate reset trade would be dollar up in terms, when I say dollar up, I'm saying the dollar compared to other currencies, fiat currencies being the euro, the pound, etc. So you have the dollar up, you've got gold up, you've got Bitcoin up. If you have that playing out over an extended period of time, that is your reset trade, because that is showing you that there's those correlations generally don't match up, and that would be the ultimate trade to put on in a reset type of period. And to say that nothing can happen for decades, and then decades can happen in a week. Yeah, and I think that's the type of scenario that we will eventually see when the system starts to unravel. But again, I'm not holding my breath for that to be occurring today or tomorrow or next week, because as we've seen, this system has a lot of durability and a lot of longevity to it because of the history that's been built around it, and obviously the military power of America and their status in the world, which doesn't just disappear overnight. But I think we are still starting to see a shift potentially in that progression towards a new currency system in some form or another.
Well, Graham and guys, when you think about everything going on in the world, you think about everything we just talked about, and so the question, that I'm sitting here saying, well, who or what decides what is going to happen? Who does that? So if we were talking to the average person and we said, hey, would you like to be subject to the control of the government, your fiat currency, told what you can do, everything tracked? The average person would say, no, of course not. Okay, well, Bitcoin allows you to maintain and do what you want and live your life, and it has the same value. Oh, okay. Well, gee, if you took a worldwide vote, everyone would probably say, well, that sounds great. But then that's not who determines what happens. That's not who determines the way the system's going to work and how we get to utilize the system. So who's actually making these decisions? I mean,
But Larry, you make up a good point there. My understanding is that what's so attractive about Bitcoin is that it's a decentralized cryptocurrency. The governments want to have a centralized digital currency or cryptocurrency, which is where the control and the monitoring by default is going to happen. So, I guess, as we've discussed in previous podcasts, the way the world's going, this momentum and this tide or this surge is not stopping. It's just going to it's how it's going to be done. So the old euro cash and dollar cash of old is going to be the respective country's cryptocurrency. But and again, in fact, I'd be interested to see what you guys say here. But the more I think about it, so any currency that is trusted, digital currency that is decentralized, is obviously going to be far more appealing than the centralized version within your respective country. But if you're not linked or dialed into it, it sounds like it's going to be it's going to be very difficult to operate within that country's system if you don't utilize their prescribed digital currency.
well, are you suggesting that every country is going to have its own, let's call it its own Bitcoin, just a different name? Because that's not going to be the same as a universal.
Well, that's my understanding, is that they want to have a centralized digital currency.
Yeah.
And how does a country maintain its control and its
Yeah.
policing and anti-money laundering laws and all of those things is being able to track and monitor its currency,
Yeah.
its digital currency.
Yeah.
Well, the way,
There's two parts to that. So the one side of it is the central bank digital currency of each country could be its digital dollar, its digital rand, its digital Mauritian rupee, its digital euro. Each uh, existing fiat currency could have a digital CBDC equivalent, and that's aligned to our two of our investments in Spectrum, one being Ripple and the other one being Quantum, where effectively you will need a layer to convert from dollars to euros or dollars to rands, and that layer could be Quantum or Ripple, being the switch, which would earn some fees. And we think that is is a good theme because Larry spoke about Graham's favorite person earlier on, Charles Schwab. I think he was also talking about the European Central Bank Digital Currency, and so
Klaus.
there have been a bunch of announcements from various governments of their intentions to have a central bank digital currency, which, as Glenn points out, is a centralized currency. It's the opposite of Bitcoin in terms of libertarianism and freedom. You've got you could, depending on whatever that government decides to do, you could be given, you could be given a stimulus check, but every week it reduces by 5% if you don't spend it. Those kind of things. Your tax could be embedded in your purchase whenever you do something. Um, and maybe that's fair. Maybe that's a good thing. But I wouldn't want someone to tell me you have to spend this money within a week or it reduces. Um, on the other hand,
Well, that
the Bitcoin side is a store of value, not for transacting immediately, whereas you may have your digital dollar to transact immediately, but you may have your Bitcoin stored for your larger pot of wealth, not your your operational money. Um, and yeah, and I think there's two very divergent use cases of cryptocurrency which are in play at the moment, and actually both of them can coexist.
okay.
It's yeah, that's the point though. They can coexist, but governments are not going to want them to because, and how do they, how do they start putting those controls in place? Well, when they have a centralized digital asset that's launched and operational, they can start saying things like, your Bitcoin will not be acceptable, will not be allowed to be used as a medium of exchange or whatever. You can't buy assets. I mean, whatever policies or rules they put in place is what's concerning. So that little ecosystem or community that likes that anonymity and private freedom that Bitcoin offers, again is almost limited to how they can operate with buying and selling assets.
Yep. All right, guys, we're coming down. We got our last question. Below, I know we're all married, and you wouldn't want anyone telling you how quickly you need to spend your money. But I will tell you that Suzanne's an expert, and my wife can get rid of $1 faster than you can imagine. I mean, it's a New York second, and it's gone. So she wouldn't have a problem. Matter of fact, she would prefer to live under that rule. It makes it much easier. She doesn't have to account to me for where it all goes.
Got the government on our
Um,
side.
oh yeah, matter of fact, that's the poster child. They've already taken her picture for when it says how fast does money move. All you do is you type that into Google and Suzanne's picture comes up. So all right, last question. We saw that there's 5 countries, including Saudi Arabia, that just agreed that they're going to trade in oil, but not use the dollar. So the question is, how is that going to affect the price of the dollar? How's it going to affect the price of oil? And how is that going to motivate and cause the price of Bitcoin to go up as more people get concerned about what's happening to the dollar?
Yeah, I mean this is quite a big question, and yeah, it's quite hard to give a definitive view on something that huge.
You want
Uh,
we could
uh,
we could answer it. We can answer it on the next podcast.
yeah. So I think what happens is it goes back to what we were saying about the reduction but not elimination of the dollar dominance, creating in a way a bit of a fairer playing field for the other economies, right? So if the dollar was good for everyone, nobody would be trying to push it out of its position. So the incentive by the BRICS nations to move to a new currency is because they perceive that that new system is going to be better for them. So we have to look at why do they think that what ingredients have they looked at to get to that conclusion? So if you look at the dollar and let's look at rands. We based in South Africa, right? South Africa produces various minerals. These minerals are sold then to, let's say, the US to produce something, right? So South Africa is supplying the raw materials, and US is, well, we know China is more the production country these days, and US is more of a service-based economy. But let's go back, you know, the last 60 years. There was a time when the US was producing and manufacturing with the raw materials, or the developed world was producing with the raw materials from the undeveloped world. Now, what happens is when the interest rate in the developed world is higher than the interest rate in the when the interest rate in the non-developed world is higher than the interest rate in the developed world, over time the currency of the mineral producing countries get weaker and weaker and weaker. So it's always cheaper for that developed world country to be buying their resources as the the um, the mining countries' currency devalues. And for example, if how that rolls out into the lives of people is, if you are South African and you had a property with 10 million rand 30 years ago, you could have moved to the US and, bought a similar house maybe. But today, that 30 million rand will buy you, a one-bedroom flat, because the rand has devalued that much over time. So I think those BRICS countries want their own countries to stand against that headwind of a currency devaluation. And one of the ways they can do that is by making, their currencies more used globally in oil trade, or just in international trade. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't. Let me
What
not
about
ramble on. I
political?
mean, does anyone else want to add anything there?
Do you have any political? Could there be political issues? I mean, the countries, these five countries right now, none of them like the U.S. Quite honestly, and they don't like the way we've treated them. I don't even think they like our morals or values or ethics. So it doesn't always just have to be, financially related. At least I don't think.
Yeah, listen. I mean, I can't speak for all of these countries, but I mean, as a South African, I know that South Africa has good ties with America, and with Russia, India, and China, and Saudis. I mean, South Africa, has balanced relationships with lots of these countries, but it is part of BRICS. Um, and Yeah, I think uh, I've been reading Ray Dalio's book recently, and he talks about, over time you've seen many countries be the leading global economy. It's been the Chinese, it's been the Spanish, it's been the Dutch, it's been the British, most recently who handed over to the Americans. And after that period of dominance comes a period of decline, and that decline is indicated by a change in the pace of education, maybe declining education. Larry, you pointed to focusing on non, focusing on issues that other countries may not have at the top of their agenda, um, which may be right or wrong. Right? Maybe it's better for human rights, but in terms of economic growth, focusing on core economic growth factors will deliver that. Uh, Although everyone may be slightly less happy about it. Um, so yeah, I mean, according to Ray Dalio's book, we are seeing the decline of the U.S. dominance, and it is. I mean, he foresees China as being the next potential global power, and I think China's alignment with Russia. Russia is a significant country. I mean, it's Russia and China and India and South Africa together are an economic and, mineral resource production financial powerhouse. Um, so Yeah, I mean that it's very possible.
So let
Okay.
me use this analogy. So I think, like in line with maybe Ray Dalio's outlook, so I think the current system is like a Jenga tower, and I think back to The Big Short, where they're building that Jenga tower, and to think that the dollar and the US is going to continue to be the leading power indefinitely is the equivalent of thinking that your Jenga tower is going to grow to the sky. It's just impossible. It's not going to work, especially the way that you've designed the debt-based monetary system. But the latest block on top of the Jenga tower is potentially this move away from some of the BRICS nations to their own currency. And Twitter's set alight, and you got all these big headlines about dollar hegemony coming to an end. It's nothing new. It's the same narrative. It's just one more brick on top of the tower, So to make a big song and dance of it, I mean, it's been like a slow motion car crash that you've watched for the last 10 or 20 years. It's not a new change in the shift of the way that the world's moving. It's just one more brick on top of the tower. So for me, it's a significant move, and I mean, especially Saudi Arabia, because it's such a big oil producing nation. It's always been on the side of the US, and that's maintained the petrodollar and everything that goes with it. So yes, it's a significant move, but it's not like a change in the current direction we're going. It's just one more step. So yeah, and for me, that's why I've been a proponent of cryptocurrency as well as precious metals for as long a period as I have. And at some stage, I think I will be right. I'm just not holding my breath on when that's going to be. So whether I'm going to be a billionaire in 1 year's time or in 10 years' time, well, you'll have to wait and find out.
Well, Graham, everything, as time goes on in life, it seems like every time there are shifts or changes, they're moving faster than the last group of changes. And so when you look at the internet, and maybe it took 25 years, or you looked at the Industrial Revolution and it took 50 years, I think you're going to see the digital revolution moving even faster than everything else. So today, things seem to change a lot quicker than they did before. So maybe you'll be a billionaire in 5 years. Okay, we'll cut it in half. You'll still be a baby, so not to worry.
Thanks, Larry. I'll take it.
Yeah, you got it.